And holy moly, what a absolute light. That lady glows.
She's a doll. No wonder people tell her she's just a really nice person because wow, she is. And you can see that light in her eyes.
Yeah. But it's like the ethos of a really nice person when people didn't say that too much because they couldn't think of another adjective for nice.
Yeah.
Like she's like the original nice
Right,
person.
right, right, right. And yeah, so excited to have her podcast on because you can see that nice person. And what feeds also that is her natural curiosity in other people, right? Like
Yeah.
she's very curious, and that's a great quality, but she's curious about other people. And I think that that comes through when they'll meet her today. But I think we're going to see a lot of that in her podcast too. So
Yeah,
it's
she's
to have
nice,
that.
but she's kind of a badass. Like
Yeah, she curses.
she curses and she
Doesn't she look
comes
like
out
she
of
wouldn't curse?
like she follows she
She's
the
so nice.
courage to come out of retirement, just follow breadcrumbs of curiosity laid before her, and has developed this huge podcast that is just like
Yeah,
this unassuming, like just really nice person asking questions. She,
yeah.
she
And then
reminds
she
me.
drops the F bomb, and you're like, oh. I feel like you and I look like, yeah, we're look like truck drivers and motorcycle riders, and we drop the F bomb. But she does it, you're like, oh, dough, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
she I've worked in a lot of places. I've moved 20 times in 18 years. And before I got married and did all that, I was traveling nurse. I've worked in big city teaching hospitals. I've worked in little podunk rural hospitals. And there was always a Michelle, on every unit that kind of young or old, I would say a grandmotherly figure, even if they
yeah,
were young, because they had like just this grounded,
old
very
soul,
experienced, have seen things in life. I mean, work in pediatric ICU and neonatal ICU, you see a lot of kids die, and just being able the kind of person who could just live even with the horrors and the things that they've seen.
sure,
And they were my go-to mentors. And she is
yeah.
the embodiment of every mentor that I sought out on every unit I've ever worked in. And she's just perfect. I'm so excited for nurses, not only for people to hear this kind of introductory podcast to Michelle Harris, but also to be introduced to the Conversational Nurse podcast, her podcast that's going to be in the RNegade library.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So excited for all you nurses listening. Welcome
Yay.
and enjoy Michelle Harris.
Rolling.
Renegades.
Andre and I had this big idea. Mind blowing.
I had to have the people who didn't believe in me.
Between one day and the next, everything changed.
Nurses know how to solve shit.
Renegades. Welcome to the RNegade podcast, a revolutionary approach to continuing education for nurses who don't just do what they're told. We're shining a light on the innovators, the pioneers, the renegades who are blowing up the boxes that the rest of the world is still trying to think outside of. On today's podcast, we are delighted to have Michelle Harris, a 36-year veteran of the nursing profession. Having split her years equally between pediatric and neonatal intensive care, she's held various roles, including bedside nurse, charge nurse, and developmental lactation nurse. She is certified in neonatal intensive care. After retiring in 2022, Michelle had difficulty letting go of her nurse identity. During her career, she had always been interested in learning about other nursing specialties. This curiosity led her to create the Conversing Nurse podcast, highlighting voices of nurses who make the profession great. She can now say she is enjoying a retirement filled with the laughter of grandchildren, the adventure of travel, the joy of volunteering, the love of family and friends, and the deep connection to the nursing community. Her podcast continues to be a valuable resource for those interested in the nursing profession, and we're so excited today to pick her brain. Welcome, Michelle.
Wow, thank you.
Well, I
Happy to
mean,
be here.
I really did a lot of research on that by reading your about page. But it's good to give just like a general edification. Mostly, I want you to tell me what somebody else would tell me about you if they were talking about you delightfully about behind your back. about the Conversing Nurse podcast, how you got here, how you started out in nursing, and basically, how you ended up here with us.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think people would just describe me, as, oh, Michelle, she's just a nice person. She's funny. She's kind of lighthearted, and she's a little bit interesting too. Maybe in a good way, maybe not.
It's probably the case, at least the little bit that I've known of you. What people find most interesting about you is that you're interested in them. I mean, it's human nature, right? And you have expanded on that just love of people and curiosity, especially about nurses, into a podcast where you interview people about their lives and their passions and things like that that otherwise we wouldn't know about.
Right. And, as you said in your intro, I spent the first 18 years in pediatrics and then the last 18 years in the NICU. And you get so isolated. We stayed with our own. So I knew, of course, what pediatric nurses did, and I knew what neonatal nurses did. As I kind of moved into the neonatal space and became skilled at going to high-risk deliveries and such, then I got to see the labor and delivery nurses and what they did, and got to see the postpartum nurses. But other than maternal child health, I really didn't know that there were so many different specialties. So I definitely was curious. And my only regret in that aspect was that I waited until I retired to get curious. I had all these years to explore, but you can't go back, right? You can only go forward. So,
yeah, but I would also think that if you hadn't had all those years, then you wouldn't have cultivated the curiosity you have to do a good job and know the questions to ask people. That's all part of the PhD in curiosity, especially if you do this kind of work when you're interviewing people. You just have to have a genuine, well, what do you do? What's that like? And
exactly.
in our youth, we're too self-centered, really. What am I doing? And you reach a point, especially in your career, you spend all of that time kind of saturating your knowledge in pediatrics and neonatal, that what else is out there? You can't force that curiosity. It's like you have to been saturated in, yeah, I know who I am. Who are you?
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the thing? What came first, the chicken or the egg? The curiosity, the retirement, or the curiosity? You know what I mean? Like, did you need that slowing down in your professional career, that space that created a vacuum for this curiosity to suck in the lives of other nurses? What came first?
Yeah, it was very, I guess, starting a podcast, learning about other nurses was kind of self-serving in a way. I knew about a year before I retired that I might have some trouble in my retirement, kind of disconnecting from this nurse identity and finding out who I am. And I had just recently became a podcast listener, really about 2 years before I started my podcast. And I've told this story before, but it just bears repeating because it just shows kind of what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I'm listening to podcasts and I'm fascinated by the whole medium, the audio and just the whole format. And I'm thinking, I don't know if this is a nurse thing. I'm thinking, how hard could it be?
Oh God, yeah, total
Right.
nurse thing. We
Right.
MacGyver everything.
Yeah, like that's really cool. You just get a microphone and you talk to people and like how hard could it be? Well, it's hard. It's pretty hard. And so there was a lot of learning curves for me, but it has helped me tremendously uh, not really disconnect from that nurse identity. because I still, identify as a nurse. Although I'm retired, I still have an active license, and but now I'm kind of looking in from afar, and I'm seeing things in the nursing profession that I didn't see when I was actually entrenched in it. And that's helped me, I think, become a better person, a better nurse, a better interviewer, and has just kept me curious.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds juicy.
I'm curious about your curiosity in what was the greatest when you started interviewing nurses? What was the greatest awareness you had initially? What was the biggest learning?
How tired they are, how much they love the profession, how much they love being a nurse. But the facade had been cracked wide open by COVID.
Yeah.
All of our frailties, all of our shortcomings, and exposed so much. And I saw these people, men and women, that were loving what they were doing, but they were like, man, I'm tired. Like, how much longer can I do this? Like, something has got to change. And that was just the overriding feeling that I was getting. So many nurses that I've interviewed just have so much exuberance and love for the profession, for their fellow nurses, for their patients, their families, their communities that they serve. But the problems have been exposed, and there's some growing resentment, some frustration, some anger.
Sure.
And I think ultimately that's going to, and it already is proving to be a catalyst for change.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a total healing that needs to go on in the healthcare profession and among professionals. Karen and I just watched the interview. Who is the doctor, Karen? I actually wrote to him to try to get him on the podcast, who was apologizing. I mean, in tears, public speaking, apologizing to his patients for misguiding them, and proposing a treatment that has caused more health and deaths to some of his patients. So I think there's a huge healing that's going on. Hopefully it changes our system in the positive. I would like to think it will. I think there's probably already been things that we could say have gone on. But yeah, a total healing.
Yeah.
And push nurses and all people over the edge, right? Like when you're saying you had this awareness for how tired they are, that if there was already fatigue, this just turned it into a complete nightmare, because everybody was pushed to the brink because we actually weren't doing things right. And I think a lot of people knew that too underneath it all. That was creating a whole nother level of stress.
Yeah. And when you were just talking, Michelle, like everything you said after that, they're just tired. Everything after that, I could feel you feeling their exhaustion. Is there something that you found in all of the nurses you've talked to, whether, out in the grocery store or on a podcast? Is there like an underlying string that links the exhaustion together? I have my own idea, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, I can just speak from my experience of working in a hospital. And so the staffing ratios are huge. The inadequacies and the, mandatory overtime, the encouragement to always, pick up a shift. And, this was really common in my institution, as I'm sure in, thousands of institutions. The, the guilt. Nurses know how patients should be cared for.
Yeah.
And there's that moral distress that ensues when that's not happening. And, other than, I always say, we need some of that. We need a packet of the Mix a Nurse, just add water. I would say this all the time on my shift, and then my fellow nurses would laugh at me, but we can't just snap our fingers and have another nurse materialize. We would call them, and then later, as technology progressed, we had these automated texts that went out, and the nurse could add anything they wanted, the charge nurses, and they did. It was all, come in and help your fellow nurses, lighten the load. And nurses are susceptible to this.
Yeah.
They've got us pegged. They know our personalities, and it's just distressing. There was a period of time that I worked, the hospital that I worked with enacted an extra shift incentive. And it was really great monetarily. It was really great. It was like, I can't pass this up.
Right.
And I worked, I was supposed to be working 3 12-hour shifts a week, and I was working 6.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I did this for a couple of years. And, I was so proud that, my husband and I put 2 girls through college, just paying cash, because I worked so much. There's a toll that takes. And, for me, my wake-up call was breast cancer. Boom. If you don't slow down, the universe is going to slow you down.
Yeah.
And in my case, that was it. And I said, something's not working here. I got to change something that I'm doing. And I did. And I've been very happy about it. But yeah, back to your point, short staffing is huge. And it's causing a lot of
before you go
moral
back,
distress.
hang on, before you go back to my point, let's just stick a pin in that for a second.
just gloss over that.
Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
the
Good thing you heard the message.
the thing that happens to us in our lives when the universe starts speaking to us in whispers that get louder and louder, and then you get breast cancer if they keep getting ignored. That that made everything different from one day to the next. How did that make your life different? How did that make you different in the world?
Yeah, it was just, it gave me, this sounds really, I don't know, it sounds, well, we'll let people judge how it sounds. But for me, getting breast cancer was an excuse, and I don't know if I'm using the right word, to take care of myself.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, now you're really sick, so you are allowed to take care of yourself. You are allowed to be off of work and not feel bad about it because you're sick. You have cancer. It's I feel like it's such a faulty thinking.
Right. It's a doorway in, but you got to adopt. It's like a crutch until you can say no, whether you're sick or not. Right.
Yeah.
So did you get,
and that learned me, that taught me,
it does
how to say no, and not feel bad about it.
How did you make the leap from needing the excuse of breast cancer or illness, or for some nurses, just complete burnout where they have task paralysis and they're calling off work because they can't even imagine going into another shift? They're at that point. How did you embody that without the excuse?
I just said, look, you love what you do. You love being a nurse. You love going to work every day, because I really did. And if you're not healthy, if you're not even here on this earth, you can't do what you love. So you're going to have to change something that you do. And I knew probably a couple years into working all that overtime that my life was spiraling downwards in terms of health, mental wellness. When you're working that many hours a week, there's just no way, there's no room for relationships. There's no room for taking care of yourself in terms of exercise. And I justified it to myself. I said, well, you're getting exercise. Look at how much walking you're doing at work every day. You know, probably
Got my
13,000
10,000
steps.
steps.
Racking up my steps.
Right? Yeah, not the right kind and not the right setting. And, you know, we were going to eating out a lot. And I was just, you know, my nutrition was complete shit.
Yeah.
And because there's no time to do anything else.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I just said, something's got to change, and you need time to figure out what it is and time to slow down. And it's okay. You don't have to have cancer. You don't have to be sick to say, no, I don't want to come in. And you don't need an excuse. I was one of those people that felt like, oh, I always needed an excuse. You know, no, I'm whatever it was, you know, whatever the excuse is. It was like, no, I can't come in today because of this. I didn't adopt the no is a complete sentence until after, you know, I was forced to by breast cancer. And
like
so, you know, when I got those calls, no, I can't come in.
There is
I
not.
like no is,
Yeah.
I like that. No is a complete sentence. I'm going to use that.
Ooh, that's the title.
Yeah, right? Right.
I'm totally stealing that. That's the title.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the title of this podcast. Yeah.
I can't
And
write that down.
there's not one nurse listening to this who can't relate to. Now, I'm going to run my hypothesis by you, because I think there's nobody better to bounce it off of than someone who's spoken to the amount of nurses that you have. I think it's operating from the overflow happens. Like, nursing is a calling, it's a vocation. It's like as much as a priest or a religious person who gets called into the faith, and that's what they do. And it's not about money. It takes a certain kind of person to be a nurse, because it ain't for the money. Right. And we operate from the overflow when we get to fully participate in our vocation. And that is sitting with people who are sick and who are vulnerable and who are lost and afraid, and just being the human connection and the human companionship that they need in that moment. And then you get the skill, you know, like, I can help you heal. I can carry out my orders. I can think critically to protect you from further injury or further illness, all the things that nurses do. The burnout to me comes from not having the ability to do that because of the way the system is set up. You know, the redundancies in charting, the short staffing, the poor, you know, the ridiculous ratios. If we had the time, I don't know about you, but when I am operating from the overflow, plugged into the mains of whatever it is that calls us to do it, I could work 16, and I've worked 16-hour shifts with a great team, with adequate ratios, gone in at 3 p.m., gotten out at 7 a.m., and I have more energy than when I got there, when it's right. There is no burnout when you have meaning and purpose. You know what I mean? That's my, yeah. What's your take on that?
I believe that wholeheartedly. And, you know, though we didn't get to see that very often, there were those days where we were fully staffed and we were allowed to spend time with our patients, to sit down with them, to hear what's going on in their world. And we were allowed to go on breaks and drink water and pee and
the little things.
Basic human function.
Yeah. What is it like the hierarchy, or I can't think of
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Food, water, shelter. Just give us some of that. We'll be good.
Yeah. And, you know, and it's sad that we're saying aloud, but those things were so few and far between. And, you know, I consider myself lucky that during all my work years, I lived in California, and towards the end of my career, we had safe staffing mandates, and so things were better, and until COVID hit, and then that kind of blew it all out of the park. But yeah, we can, when we're doing what our hearts love to do, the energy is endless, and that's certainly proven to be true.
So when you look back on your, sorry, Wendy, just one more question on this string. When you look back on your 6 shifts, 6 12s a week before you ultimately got sick, can you, I don't know, I just lost it.
Sorry.
Well, no, well, you said bound. No, you didn't. It wasn't that. It was like you were talking about you have boundless energy when you're working, when you're plugged into the mains. That was my word. Could you feel the drain before the illness, or did you just get numb to it? Because I think that's what allows us to keep, you know, I think of the night. I don't know why I just thought of it. Have you ever seen Monty Python's The Holy Grail? Have you ever seen that movie? And the Black Knight, who's like, he loses an arm, then he loses a leg, and he's just a stump on the ground going, come here, I'll bite your legs off. It's like, we are that blind to our own withering, you know? Yeah. I don't know how I look back on what I did. I'm sure you do on what you did. And who was that person? How did I endure that?
I don't know where that came from. I will say I felt the burnout during that time. I wasn't sleeping. Like I said earlier, I wasn't exercising. I wasn't taking any time for myself. I wasn't eating well. And I was feeling the burnout. And I've never been a person that's been motivated by money. But that money made me feel more valuable as a nurse. And, maybe it's because I'm old school, because I think nurses today, many of the nurses that I've interviewed, nursepreneurs, lots of nurse entrepreneurs, money is a motivating factor, and they do not have one shred of guilt about it. They do not feel bad about that at all. But my generation, I became a nurse in 1986. We felt like, man, we're above the fray if we are not motivated by money. It's just our need to help people, or whatever our motivation was, but it was never money. And I've always said, nurses don't do it for the money or the applause. Mm-hmm. And I think that those days are gone, because I've talked to so many nurses that are doing it for both of those reasons. And I definitely felt the burnout, but I just kept going because I honestly, it's as simple as I don't like debt hanging over my head. Mm-hmm. And so, I ran the numbers and I said, man, we can put these girls through college if I work this many shifts.
Yeah.
And we did, but at what cost, right?
At your physical health cost. Like I was kind of headed down the same path as Karen, because I was thinking as you were saying things, not getting a drink of water, not getting to eat, not being able to go to the bathroom. Think of the processes, right, that we are shutting off from the body. And then the body's learning to adapt that way, but it's not adapting well. It can only do that so long. So you're not sleeping right. You're not getting natural sunlight. You're not eating. If you're eating, you're probably not eating properly. So you're losing nutritional value. You're not hydrating. You're even turning off going to the bathroom. I mean, in a system that is supposed to be health care, right?
Yeah.
Nurses, and I'm sure doctors and others, are living completely out of alignment with the biological, biochemical, physiological processes of the body. So how can you not end up sick? How can you not? Right? Like it seems the destiny.
Yeah, that kind of lifestyle, it's just not sustainable for anything.
No.
Either you're going to get sick, or you're going to, have a heart attack, or you're going to have a mental health crisis. Um, it's just not sustainable. It's almost like running a MASH unit. It's just constant, you're in constant fight or flight. You're in constant adrenaline surge. And it's like at one point I felt like all I'm doing is going to work, coming home, eating, sleeping, but it wasn't really sleeping.
Sure.
Getting up and doing it again. And the whole time I was like, well, you know what you got yourself into. You're doing this for a reason. And so you just prevail. Don't give up.
But so the earning the money. So I'm trying to tie these two strings together, because for you it didn't work. But you're saying that for the nurses, that the nursepreneurs that you talk to, where they have no problem taking the money and the accolades, that almost inoculated them against the burnout, but it didn't you.
Well, they did burn out. And so many of the nurses that I talked to, they burned out, and then they made a shift.
Got it.
And they went into either business for themselves or into another non-hospital, non-bedside role in order for them to slow down and regroup. For me, it was like a badge of honor. It was like, when I looked at what I made, when I did my taxes, when I looked at that number, I was like, wow, I'm just a nurse and I made this much money. So for me, it was just all ego. It was 100% ego.
Yeah. So if you're a nurse, what's the feeling you associate with going to the mailbox and seeing that notification that says your license is up for renewal in 90 days? Do you go, yes? Or, oh, right? Why? I mean, it's not like they're hard to get. You have 2 years and there's so much free stuff out there. And yet we drag ourselves across the finish line, kicking and screaming, because they suck. They're boring and antiquated, and the delivery mechanism is inconvenient. And the thing is, if you're a nurse, we love to learn. We're always listening to podcasts and audiobooks and YouTube videos because we're just curious. But we have to pick through this pile of crap so that we can remain a nurse. Well, we created RNegade.pro to change that. We wanted nurses to be able to get credit for the stuff that they're naturally inclined to do anyway. It starts with a podcast. And then we're creating courses, and we want everything we do to feel like what you're naturally doing. The research shows that that's how we learn and retain best. Check it out. Pick one. See what you think. So maybe when you go to the mailbox next time and get that notification, you'll have that, yes, because they're already done.
Because I was going to say, when we actually do truly live in concert with our total belief system, like Karen, like you were just saying, like for nursepreneurs who really value the money, right? And that's a mindset, that's a core belief system. They probably can work to the point of excess and not burnout, because that's a core driver for them. But when you're really living out of alignment, that's then adding a whole nother level of stress to the already stressed environment you're creating for your body. Because it's really, you were saying earlier, you're not motivated by money, but you kind of were when your ego was out of alignment, right? And but it really wasn't who you really are. It's not really a core value for you.
It really wasn't. And when you're not living your core values, it's almost, in a way, I felt like a prostitute.
Yeah, totally. You're selling your soul.
Yeah. And,
Don't whistle.
full disclosure, I've never been a prostitute. But I can just imagine
I was going to say, this
yeah.
podcast is going to go a whole nother direction now if we get into that.
Well, they probably burn out too if there's no meaning and purpose in their work.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, though, if burnout, if burnout is causing all of these nurses to leave the bedside and go into business, who's going to be left at the bedside? What do we need to do?
I mean, we got a crisis with that now, right? There's a crisis, a hiring crisis.
Do you think this great awakening of the brokenness of the system, have you seen it shifting?
I have seen a shift, and it's just a start. And the nurses that I talk to are, man, they're just amazing because they're so motivated so they've stepped out of that system, and they've seen all the discrepancies and all the problems within that system. And now they're doing their own thing, and they're very happy. And now they're coming up with solutions for the nurses that are still, what I call the boots on the ground or the first line, to help those nurses. And I absolutely love that. And I say this a million times on my show that I'm a huge fan of nurses helping nurses, because who knows better what we're going through than another nurse?
Yeah.
And they're so innovative at how they help nurses. So here's an example. I interviewed a gentleman, Tofiki Gafar Shaner, early on. I don't know what his episode number was.
Can you say that one more time slow?
So this is a gentleman that I interviewed as an informatics nurse, and his name is Tofiki Gafar Shaner.
Okay.
Awesome individual. So we talked all about informatics nursing, but then he has this little thing on his side where he co-created a product that is called Safe Seizure. And
I know him.
Yeah, right?
Cleveland
Okay.
Clinic.
Yes. Amazing guy. Him and Joey, his partner, I can't think of his last name, but amazing individuals. And they've gotten their product out there everywhere now. And, Tofiki had this idea during the pandemic when he had kind of all this downtime. And what is one of the things that nurses complain about when they have somebody on seizure precautions, right? Those crappy,
Yeah. Or
the
you're taping bed blankets to the bedside railings.
Yeah, we've all been there. We've all done it. And they just took this solution and made this product that made the lives of nurses easier and the lives of patients better because they're safer.
Yeah.
And I talked to Alex, Alex Whitefield. So he's the break nurse. He invented technology so that hospitals can use to make sure nurses get their breaks. So, all these nurse innovators that are seeing all these holes and all these gaps, and they're filling it. They're being innovative, and they're designing processes or products to make the lives of nurses easier. And I just have a lot of respect for that.
It's that next generation coming up, right? Like I remember so many articles in the business world kind of bashing millennials and Gen Xers and calling them lazy because they were demanding certain things in work environments, right? So I think we can see the same thing happening in healthcare with nursing, because they're not that some aren't lazy, right? That exists everywhere. But they're pushing back big time. These next generations are pushing back on how we've all learned with our ages to just exist, suck it up, and take it. And so I think the way they push back creates this change. And then, of course, we're booming in an AI and technology world. So some of these things can be taken care of through technology, right? And some of them is just forcing people to look at things differently because they're not going to take it.
Oh my gosh.
I quit. You
Wendy, you just pointed out something so cool and beautiful about how God works. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that generation that we're like, they're so, the helicopter parents and everybody got a trophy and they're so entitled and blah, blah, blah. Well, thank God for that entitlement, because you only put up with what you think you deserve.
Yes.
And they've been taught you're number one, you deserve a trophy, and
Yes.
they're not going to settle for no bathroom breaks. I mean, are you effing kidding me? I don't think so. And how cool
That's
is
what
it
they're doing?
It's like that generational turn with the fourth turning.
Yeah.
It's hard times create strong men create easy times create weak men create hard times, and it's whatever. Well,
the cycle. Yeah.
Their quote unquote weakness, that's
Right.
not weakness. Their entitlement was very necessary to create the next generation of strong people who start to say no is a complete sentence.
Exactly. I mean, I've learned that from I got into it with our daughters, you know what I mean? And listening to how they respond to things at work. And sometimes I'd think, you can't do that, or you can't say that, or that's not right. And there's times I'm right, but I'm finding more times that I'm like, damn, why didn't I handle that way? Or why didn't I think to push back? And they're just like, they don't care. They're like, yeah, not doing that.
Yeah.
That's not a way to treat me. And I'm a valuable person. I'm a valuable employee. That's not a way to treat. So yeah, Karen, you can see how things change, and they tried to make it a negative, right? Like there was years ago, there were so many articles in the business world about picking on these generations and literally calling them lazy because they don't want to change, right? Business doesn't want to change. But they're staying the course and pushing back. And it is changing in ways that it must to sustain humanity. Yeah.
Yeah. They have learned the courage to be disliked, which nurses of our generation, Michelle, like we ran on everybody just get along here, don't rock the boat. And the ones that did, like you, it's usually after some kind of crisis happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I love about the younger nurses too is they're kind of like, yeah, I'm a nurse. Like, so what? Like, what is the huge thing about that? Like, they are not so into their nurse identity as I feel like maybe former generations were. And I love that. It's like they're like, I do this other thing, I travel, I'm just so multifaceted. And that's something that I look at them in awe and go, gosh, give me some of that. I want to not be so connected to, like, that's the only thing that I am is a nurse. And I'm very proud of that. And that's what's retirement has helped me do. It's helped me cultivate some of those other interests besides being a nurse.
Yeah. Like learning to be a podcaster, which brings me to my next question. I just love the flow of this. So after your breast cancer experience and diagnosis, and then you found the courage to be disliked and to say no as a complete sentence. And now how are you bringing that to other nurses in the nursing profession? Because what I find is like somebody has this this puddle of, for me, I call it my puddle of snot and tears moment where, everything was different from one day to the next, even though nothing about my reality changed. I had my own health crisis and all of these different diagnoses, and I couldn't do it anymore. Just surrendered. And nothing about my circumstances changed, but the way I was in them was completely different. And all my symptoms went away. Like I healed from just, I learned my favorite prayer. Fuck it. And now I felt compelled to tell everybody else, like anybody who would come into the sound of my voice, the courage to be disliked is what made all the difference. That's what gave me my health back. And that's what made me able to go through the world whole, knowing that the things that I was burning the shizzle out of myself seeking, I had all along. and I get the sense that you've embodied that. And now all these people, how do you give that to them? Is it through the podcast? Is it through other things?
I think they're giving it to me, honestly, Karen.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, I really feel like I'm learning so much from each one of my guests that they are standing up to the establishments, and they are the ones that are saying, fuck it, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I'm just in awe, and I get to take it all in and go, wow, I love that. And, don't make this mistake of, always saying yes or feeling guilty. Um, you know, I, again, the only regret is that, I didn't learn all this earlier, because it certainly would have saved me some angst in life.
Yeah. You had mentioned before when we first met and we're talking to you about being on the podcast, you were talking about how you're starting to interview people that aren't nurses. And we've started doing that too. And we even have now invited partner podcasts on that aren't necessarily driven by nurses, but they're
Nurse-centric.
nurse-centric and experts in the health field. And you said something in the beginning of today that actually speaks to the necessity for both of our podcasts doing that, because you said you were so siloed in your area in your specialty, right? In your area of expertise. And so you weren't learning about all these other things until you started listening to podcasts and learning about all these other nurses. And we feel empowered that nurses have got to get all this information that they don't get from continuing education because it's very siloed. But they also don't necessarily get from all nurses either. So what was it that you saw the need for that too, that you're reaching outside of interviewing nurses to other people, and what kind of people are you interviewing?
Let's see. I have just recently interviewed a fire chief. So this came to be because after a while, some of my listeners and some of my guests have said, I challenge you to talk to folks who are not in nursing, and maybe they're in healthcare in some capacity, but they're not nurses. And honestly, this idea never occurred to me because I thought, again, I kind of tend to put myself in a box and I say, well, this is a nursing podcast, so I only have to talk about nursing or nurses.
And you forgot the nurse that makes it a nursing podcast, no matter who you're talking to.
Yeah. So, at others' requests, I have said, this is an interesting concept. I will see about this. So I interviewed a social worker, and of course, social workers, they work with nurses. And I interviewed a fire chief because again, my view of a fire chief or a firefighter, first responder, we see them, right? They come into the hospital. They're usually in the emergency room bay, dropping off a patient, or we see them out in the community in some fashion. And so that was really interesting. And the gentleman that I interviewed, Charlie Norman, he's actually my neighbor. And so our houses are just catty corner to each other. And so I always got to see him helping our neighbors, like bringing in their trash cans. I would say hi in passing. And then one Christmas, not this Christmas, but last Christmas, he shows up at my door and he's bringing some gifts, some snacks that his wife made. And, just say, hey, I'm your neighbor. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know. I see you over there helping all the neighbors. But when I decided to interview Charlie, man, I found so many similarities in the fire profession and in the nursing profession. And so those were really kind of fun to sit there and go, oh yeah, we do that too, or oh yeah, that's happening in our administration too. They are working short staffed, and they are working on a very tight budget, and the people that hold the money are saying we don't have money for that. But then every year they vote themselves another raise. And so those kind of disparities and discrepancies that we're seeing, and these are people that save lives and keep our communities safe, and we're not giving them very much credit and very much to work with at all. And they're picking up a lot of extra shifts. They're being told they have to do mandatory overtime, and firefighters are dying, really at a really high rate from cancer is one of the big killers of firefighters because of all the chemicals that they're exposed to, and the chronic sleeplessness, the change in their schedules, suicide. First responders see things that they can't unsee. Very similar to nurses, they suffer from a lot of PTSD. So it was just so interesting to find so many similarities, and I think that's what I've been finding in talking with these different professions.
You get all the commonalities. Like nurses, the nursing profession isn't alone, and it sounds like you've discovered other professional other either healthcare or people care professions, police, fire, any kind of first responder thing, any profession that can be considered a vocation, really. And how does it become more of a handbreaker turn than trying to right the Titanic away from the iceberg that it is? In your sense, in your podcasting thing, what do you think it's going to take?
Man, that's a
you
big
might not have the
question.
answer. I'm just
Yeah, it's just going to take a shift, a mindset shift. In all of these professions, they're all experiencing burnout at such high rates, and the the burnout is so real and so pervasive, and it has to do with, really, when it comes down to it, people neglecting themselves and putting the other entity first in their lives. And that has to change, whether you have to separate yourself from that identity, whether you have to say no more, you have to cultivate your own mental health. It's going to have to come down to that, to each individual. These entities that we're working with, I don't, I don't see them changing anytime soon. If anyone's motivated by money, I think it's some of these entities, which is really sad that healthcare has become such a business. But it is what it is. But it has to start with the person. And I think that's what we're doing one by one, is getting the word out that it has to start at home. So whatever profession you're in, whatever kind of professional you are, it has to start with you, and learning boundaries, learning how to cultivate your own mental health, your own self-care, your own identity, aside from the profession. It's got to start there. And for nurses, I think it's going to, academically, I think we need to start in nursing school. I think nursing schools need a whole overhaul on their curriculum. I know some nursing schools are now implementing mental health concepts like meditation, journaling, those kinds of things. And happily, lots of students are coming into nursing schools now already having developed a lot of those own self-care, mental health modalities. So hopefully there's hope for the future that they will be coming in as more whole of a person and not looking to a profession to define them.
Beautiful. And I love your answer because it really makes it so simple. Like, it's the next generation that's learning these things that will teach the next generation. And it's almost like math. You know, when we're young, we're taught it, the signals on what to do and how to take care of ourselves are pretty basic. When you're hungry, you eat. When you're thirsty, you drink. When you're tired, you rest. When you're restless, you move, right? But when we were little kids, we were taught to ignore these very simple, obvious signals. You know, clean your plate, but I'm not hungry anymore.
Yep.
Ignore your hunger, ignore your satiation. You know, mom says, mom must know better. You know, apologize to that boy, but I'm not sorry. He's a jerk. He stole my toys. I'm sorry. Apologize. You know, so even that internal ick about somebody, you're forced to push through it and actually say something nice to somebody who just some jerk who just stole your toys. Apologize. Share your toys. I don't want my internal fight or flight, my friend or foe instinct, my most basic human instinct, I'm told to ignore because I don't like that kid. He picks his noses and wipes it all over himself. And I don't want to share my toys. They're going to get all boogery, you know?
Yes.
And tell the kids, ignore you.
Yeah.
And then we who are called to the nursing profession, it continues, ignore you, you know? And the funny thing is, if it would all work fine if we could just do what we're built to do and the meaning and the purpose and be with people and help to heal them and not get paid for it. We don't care, as you found out. Ultimately, the money was a balm because it gave me my value was outside of me. Instead of being taught that my value, the thing that tells me to eat and drink and rest and blah, blah, and not apologize to that jerk, that's all inside of me. And we're taught. So I'm hoping, I love what you just said because it brings it back to that very simple things. We have an internal manual built into the system of how best to take care of ourselves. We just have to learn the language again.
Yeah, I love that. And it's simple, but not easy, right? Yeah.
And we're very powerful beings, right? It's be the change, right? Be who you are, your authentic self. And in a room of 10 nurses, right? And they're all being told to do something that none of them want to do, feels appropriate, isn't right, they're exhausted. And imagine if every single one of them just thought, well, I'm just going to be me and say no, right? That's when there's power in the numbers. If one person does it and everybody's looking at that person like, oh shit, right? They're in trouble, right? And nobody else wants to do it, then the establishment gets away with it. But when the whole group of 10 says no, because everybody's really secure in themselves to do that, no matter the consequences, well, then change has to happen, right? Then it will. So imagine if we all just take responsibility for ourselves and just do it for you, show that, put that out there, then it gives other people permission.
Yeah, and so thankful for pioneering nurses like Rebecca Love that is bringing light to those issues. The Nursing is STEM movement, she's telling nurses, like, you are valuable. You are very valuable. And don't let anybody tell you that you're not. You should have a seat at the table when decisions are being made about nurses, about nursing. Why are there not nurses there? You need to have a seat at the table. You need to know your own value, and so thankful for nurses like that are getting the word out.
Yeah, it's like the major shift is instead of your no coming from a breast cancer diagnosis and as an excuse, your no comes from your value.
Yeah.
Right. And that very powerful thing, actually, it's the biochemistry. It's where the spiritual kind of and the biochemistry intersect, is when you say yes, when your body is saying, no, I need to rest. When you say that cognitive dissonance, when your external behaviors don't don't reflect your internal values and beliefs, that friction in our nervous system causes massive amounts of inflammation. And we live in that inflammation of cognitive dissonance every day when you're working a shift, when your body is saying, no, no, no. Yeah.
Yep. Seen it happen many, many years and been a part of it.
Me too.
Me three.
And here we are. Yeah. Well, I love what you said also about this next generation. That was like a big boom for me. Like, oh my gosh, these entitled little
Rats.
these
know
entitled
shit.
fuckers are going to save us all.
Yeah, I say that all the time about my daughter. So my daughter, she just turned 38. And I'm just like, how are you the wisest person in the room now? Because it's like I'm learning from her every day how to find that gumption, how to, I remember during COVID, I came home many months every day saying, this is wrong, that is wrong, this doesn't work, this makes me mad, this person is doing this or management is doing this. And she's such a good listener, and she would just listen and take it all in and then not offer any advice. And this went on for a good 6 months. And one day she just said, Mom, have you ever thought of talking to your management team about this? And it was just like, wait, what? I can do that? This is an option? And she's like, clearly you're not happy with how things are going. I've heard for the last 6 months. Clearly you have ideas. Clearly you are not communicating those ideas for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So what would happen if you just communicated your needs? So, and I was like, wow, okay.
Then what happened?
Yeah. Then I went and talked to my management team and things got better.
Yeah.
But again, it like took me 6 months of complaining. And I just think, man, every day what that was taking out of me and what that was putting onto her. I was like, man, you have a high tolerance, like to listen to me bitch for 6 months and just listen. But, it's like I needed that, but it was terribly unfair to her and to myself to not speak up earlier.
Yeah. That's a great awareness.
It sounds like she had the thing that we don't have, like my daughters have, that I don't have, that inoculated her against it was like she's on, I don't know, I'm speaking for you, but I intuited in what you were saying that she wasn't really harmed by holding the bucket for you because she has those boundaries built in.
Yes. And I just admire that so much.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, how did you come out so well from being raised by this woman? Yeah.
Well, it's because we gave him a trophy for everything. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I have so much, I have the same experience with my daughters for things as mundane and common life kind of stuff as, they break up with a boyfriend because it's just not working for them. I mean, that I couldn't do that. Like, it was like I would stay in relationships for months and months ahead of time because I didn't want to hurt the person. I didn't want to be the bad guy. They're like, nope, this ain't working for me. See ya.
Yeah.
That's it.
Unapologetically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will have its things too, right? Like we're seeing so many, like every single generation, it will have its thing too that we'll need to correct as humanity, and that's how the cycle keeps going. but this is a good one, and it's going to have its place and change a lot of things for the positive that absolutely must change. And hopefully we can stay more in balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because to change, we always go.
Something's plugged into the back of my head and it can't fit out my mouth. There's like too much coming.
Oh yeah, me a million times during my interviews. I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. Well, I want to know, kind of to bring it on home to the Conversing Nurse podcast. What are you getting out of it?
Man, I get so much out of it. It's so fun. It's a creative endeavor. I've always been a creative person. I've always needed a creative outlet, whether it's art or making something with my hands. And podcasting is 100% a creative endeavor. The research that goes into finding out who your guests are, and just formulating your questions and the conversation. Then I still get nervous before every conversation. Tomorrow my 128th episode releases. And and I still get butterflies every time. I'm just like, I want to do a good job. I want to make that person really shine. I want to bring out the best in that person. And that is just, it's so much fun. And then editing, I'm a big like tech kind of, I don't know how it happened, but I love editing. And I just love
Karen
that whole,
too.
yeah.
God bless you. No,
She
actually,
doesn't.
Wendy, that's not true. I do.
I know.
I do.
Yes, you are
It's just,
very creative.
I don't
and-
love the time. I love
Yeah.
The
that.
time,
Michelle.
yeah.
Yeah.
The time, and I haven't even delved into video yet, so I haven't done any video. And my program that I record on just got the ability to record video, and so I am now kind of researching, do I want to go that route? Do I want to get on YouTube? I don't know. I'm really happy with how things are. So,
Yeah.
and it comes back to, hey, it's your podcast, Michelle. You can do what you want. You don't have to be influenced by anybody, any, podcasting, quote unquote experts saying, oh, you're not gonna do well if you don't get on YouTube. It's like, I'm doing okay. And I like where I am, and I'm getting a lot out of it. I'm putting a lot into it, but I'm getting a lot out of it.
Yeah.
I just was giggling in my head thinking, you can say no as a complete sentence.
That's right. Yeah, and I've gotten really good at, the thing that is funny is, on all my social media, so on my website and everything, it says, hey, if you want to be a guest on my podcast, pitch me. And so I have quite a few people pitching me, and some of them don't fit the person that I want to interview. And I've had to say no. And, and it's okay. And I know how to say no respectfully. That doesn't hurt them and that doesn't hurt me.
Right.
That's one of the things in our generation we learned really well was etiquette, right? Almost to a fault.
Yeah.
But everyone is not right to be my guest. But I have gotten a lot of great guests from people just pitching me and saying, hey, I'm doing this or that. And I'm like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? This is amazing. Let's do it.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, you obviously, when you are the interviewer, you could tell it, you have cultivated your interest and your curiosity and your questions. Like here, being the interviewee, there's almost this compared to you being the interviewer, you're more subdued. Like I don't really like, I want people to know about my podcast and about me, but I don't really like to talk about myself, kind of thing. But when it's about when it's about somebody else, oh man, like, yeah, you could tell, like, you just speak through your love of people and your curiosity for what they're doing and how they're making the world a better place. It's a beautiful thing. You are perfectly suited for that role.
Yes.
And
wow, thank you, Karen.
After sitting with you for about an hour, I agree. You are just a really nice person. Like you're just really have this great energy, that's great, grounded. I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you, Karen.
Well, it's how my word for God is George, is how George speaks through Michelle. It's a beautiful thing. So thank you for your time. And where can
Love it.
people hear the Conversational Nurse podcast? Besides on the RNegade platform, maybe.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I was
I
going to say,
know.
spoiler alert.
I know. I'm so excited about that. So I have a website, theconversingnursepodcast.com. I am on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, all those places. If you go to my website, you can see all those links. And I'm on Instagram primarily at the Conversing Nurse Podcast. I'm on LinkedIn, which I have found so many great guests on LinkedIn. I love it. I'm just there as Michelle Harris. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So to expand on the spoiler alert, we are so excited to have some of Michelle's podcasts into the RNegade library, and whichever of them tick the boxes of the California State Board of Registered Nursing qualifiers for a continuing education credit, you can find those on RNegade and listen to the podcast and I bet there's a lot, because career is a big continuing education topic, like the specialty, the evolution of the nursing profession, and that's kind of Michelle's wheelhouse. So look for those to be coming to the RNegade library soon, and get your continuing education credit by listening to Michelle.
Yes.
So excited. And thank you, Wendy and Karen, for the opportunity to do that. That's just, it's such a novel thing, and it's exciting.
It makes,
Thanks.
it's kind of just I call it the artistry of common sense. Like,
it really is.
I'm learning when I listen to podcasts. I'm learning things that I don't learn in the, it's what I'm naturally inclined and drawn to listen to and learn to advance my skills and advance my profession as a whole. And why not? We should get credit for that, Shizzle.
Yeah. Wow.
You're not alone today. I think the stat now is 75% of healthcare professionals are learning from podcasts. So, artistry of common sense. Why don't they get continuing education credits for it? So, but they can now at RNegade.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, right. That's what we do. So
shameless plug. Thank you so much for your time, Michelle.
Thank
this is where
you.
we say goodbye, but we don't really say goodbye because, that's what we just, because it just feels like too sharp of an ending to hit stop record and then have you leave. So we're just going to pretend. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ladies.
Renegades.